So, what is the best method for learning JavaScript? When you are a complete beginner, I highly recommend to look at examples, tweak them, change small things, try to understand how the syntax looks like, even without deep explanations, without reading a book or studying in details the different concepts of the language. You can learn a lot. So in this section, I propose that you look at a small example without understanding the details and try to tweak it. So here is the example we provided. Is just an example that draws, that plots a mathematical function. So you can use the mouse wheel to zoom in, zoom out, and you can look at the HTML code. There is only a very few CSS and very few lines of JavaScript. So how can we do such a complex result, complex thing, drawing a grid with axes, with labels, with a curve, and interact with the mouse with only 10 lines of code? It's because we are using what we call an external JavaScript library. Actually, we are using two of them here, because this one, the function plot JavaScript libraries, is using internally another one you must include also in the document. So what I propose is that we will start looking at this example. The best way is to click on the Edit on CodePen label here. This will open the code in the codepen.io online editor. And just look at the HTML part here. Okay, we can just look at the HTML part. I'm zooming a little bit. What do we see? We can see that it uses two libraries here between the script and /script elements. This is how we can insert in the document an external JavaScript file. In that case, it's a remote JavaScript file because we are downloading it using HTTP. So it uses the W3CJS JavaScript library that is located at w3js.org. You can open this in another tab, and you will see the documentation and the website, the home page of the website for the W3JS library. By the way, W3JS is one of the most popular JavaScript library for visualizing data. So let's go back to our example. So you can just tweak the different elements. If I want to plot a cosinus instead of a sinus, I don't need to understand the whole syntax here, but I guess that by just typing cos here, it will do something. And indeed, it just has drawn a cosinus. If I change this for green, it changes the color. If I changes the grid, that is by default true. If I said false, I don't have a grid anymore. Okay, let's put it back. And I've got some x-axis domain, -1, +1. If I change that from -10 +10, I can see the result. So it's more interesting if we change this for the x values. Instead of going from p to 2p, I went from 0 to 10p. So I can see the result here. And so on. So now that you tweaked the example, you can try to understand what is going on. Okay, this thing is a name followed by a parenthesis, an open parenthesis, and closed by with a closing parenthesis. It's a function call. When you've got something like that in JavaScript, function parenthesis with something in the middle is called a function call. We are going to call a function that in this case we haven't written, so it's coming from one of the external libraries. In that case, it's the function plot library. What is inside are the parameters. And I can use an external name, I can declare that here. It's equivalent. You see that it works the same here, but I just separated the two things. If I put directly this thing inside here, like it was before, it still works. Okay? So what is this syntax? In JavaScript, when you've got braces like that, opening braces and closing braces, it's called an object. And inside an object, you've got properties and values. The properties are names, target, data, function, color, grid. And the values are after a colon character. The target is my function. The data is this thing. The grid is true, and so on. So you separate the different properties of the object using a comma. And sometimes you can have some properties that in turn have a value that is an object. So the x-axis is equal to the x-axis property is equal to an object that has a property domain that has for values -1 + 1. And when you've got brackets, opening and closing brackets, it's like that we define arrays of things in JavaScript. An array of things is a list of enumerable elements. So in that case, the domain has two elements, the minimum value and the maximum value. And here you can see that the data that are plotted, the cosinus function, is also in an array. So if I use a comma and I introduce a second element here, for example, the sinus function, and if I change the color, let's make it pink, look at the result. I've got two different functions that have been plotted in my graph. So I can, instead of using this, I can maybe plot x2, x square 2, like this, okay? It should work, okay? We can see a little bit of it here. So maybe we will change the domain. So instead of stopping at 1, we go to 10. Here we go. And if we look at the values, we see the x square function that is a bit better. And if we just plot it for x equals 0 to x equals 2, okay, sorry, okay, in that case, I've got another scale for looking at the functions. So in this first example, you saw how to use external library, what is the syntax to call a function, and how we can define objects in JavaScript by using a set of properties and values separated by comma. And we also had the first encounter with what we call arrays, that are things separated by commas, elements separated by commas inside brackets.